What do you think of how the pro GG people have been responding? Not that everyone in my audience is pro GG necessarily. Some of them are anti, some of them are neutral, but a lot of them are pros. And also on Twitter, I know Oron and a couple other people I think were tweeting at you. I think Gamer Scholar. I don't know if he technically identifies as pro GG. I don't know him really, but
Hmm.
too well. But what do you think of how they've all been like super receptive? Or I don't know, maybe they haven't all been, but to this
I
development.
think I think they're generally pretty receptive. I've noticed the people who actually see what I have to say are generally a lot more receptive of. Like you said, you watched my video on Sweet Baby, and you said it was a very normal and fine take. There are a lot of people who think that my takes are just absolutely batshit insane, and I think that they're the people who don't actually spend the time finding out what my take is. Generally, I think they just let my reputation precede me and attack me based on whatever they think I'm going to say. So basically, everybody who seems like they've actually engaged with what I have to say either is accepting of me or doesn't really have an opinion on me and is just basically fine with whatever.
All
I
right.
have found. I like the people who there are a couple of people that I wasn't aware of, but they seem to be aware of me through Gamergate. I've had a couple of responses with people trying to be like, "You had a fake girlfriend," or something like that, or bring up the nut kick as though that like, in all honesty, the nut kick thing, I it's hard for me to feel insulted by.
All right. Well, hey, I know we've kind of did this at the beginning, but the first question on the list is tell me about your GamerGate experience.
Well, yeah, I think I kind of did answer that in the beginning. I think like I said, I kind of went through a period like I was introduced to Gamergate in a very odd way by somebody who was pro Gamergate but was very uninformed and very angry and was calling for me to denounce somebody that I didn't even know who they were, and I generally have regarded that as a sign that somebody is not necessarily on the right side of history. Just a little hint for anybody in the future: know what you're talking about, and don't demand that people just like denounce somebody that they don't know. That's a good way to, and this goes to left, right, anybody. Like that's not a good place to start from, and that informed my entire experience with Gamergate and put me, in my opinion, on a propensity to believe the side that I think ultimately was more in the wrong in terms of who they were defending.
So I've had a weird to make it all about me, of course. I've had a weird change over the course of I've had multiple changes over the course of my life. One of which was like this adoption of like this extremely honest approach to life,
Yeah.
which I think has actually worked out really well. And it's in fact, I think it's worked out extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
because like yes, you're gonna be put in situations, or you're gonna like a situation sometimes where like being honest might piss somebody off. But the thing about the honesty is it's always better in the long term. Um,
Absolutely.
absolutely, it 1,000% is. Actually, I read a book by Sam Harris called "Lying." Actually, I didn't read it. I listened to a pirated audio version of it. But um, Sam Harris is a cool guy. He believes that anyone doesn't who can't afford something should have access like information should have access to information even if they
Mm-hmm.
can't afford it. So he's like he wouldn't care. That's like his philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it sort of like changed my life. And I decided I was going to adapt to radical honesty, and I have been for I don't know when exactly. The past couple of years at least, or past year and a half maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, there's situations where it's like, oh, well, me being honest kind of hurt somebody's feelings a little bit, but in the long term, I'm not keeping track of all these lies. Like, oh shit, did I see it by people I know in real life, people who I like, you know, and they're always
Mm-hmm.
getting dogged by these lies that they keep telling, and they got to try to keep track of them and trying to like try to convince other people to lie on
Oh
their
man.
behalf now, and they end up creating these vast network of conspiracies,
Yeah.
and they have to keep track. And then of course
Absolutely.
it usually falls apart on them. Um, Not right away, but 6 months, a year down the line, oh shit, a partner found out about that thing that happened, or
Mm.
whoops, you know. But if you're honest, you
I'm
don't
a
have to worry about any of that shit.
I'm a firm believer in 12-step programs. I believe that they're very, very good, and they also preach that same principle. Just generally uh, not lying, like trying to be honest with yourself and with people around you. I think that that's an important principle for life because without it, you're in a state of constant anxiety, and you're having to. I mean, there are situations where I think everybody ends up in that kind of a situation. Like I have had to do that at workplaces before, and it creates just endless amounts of anxiety. And that's why I think a lot of people don't want to stay in certain jobs because they're in a situation where by necessity they have to do something like that. Um, I've had jobs like that in my past. And yeah, no, I'm you sleep so much better when you don't have to
Well, I
figure
don't
out.
sleep well at all, but like that's an unrelated issue, I think. Uh,
I sleep like a baby nowadays, but I think that I don't sleep enough. I still am fairly tired a lot of the time, and I eat well. I exercise. I don't know. I think maybe I just like my nickname on I was on radio right out of high school for a short period of time on a morning show. I was the stunt guy doing stupid things. That bled into my national identity, but my nickname on that was Sleepy Pete because it was a morning show and I would always show up. I had to get up at 5 in the morning to be on that show, and as such, I would always, for about the first hour of the show, be basically dead as I was consuming some caffeine beverage of some kind. And I got the nickname Sleepy Pete.
yeah, the
And
I good.
well, I think that it's an accurate nickname.
I would the lying thing. I would slightly caveat it. Of course, because like if there's a situation in which using violence is justified, then lying is justified. It's like when the Nazis come to your door asking for
Absolutely,
where
there
are the
are
Jews at? Are
yeah,
they in your attic? I don't think you have to tell them yes. Um,
exactly,
but
exactly.
but also too, this is something that Sam Harris brings up. Though I disagree with him. I think he thinks that it's okay. Or well, I don't know. He raises this question basically in the book. He's
Right.
like, well, what if you have an unjust law? So like the cop asks, hey, did your friend do weed? And you're in a state where
Hmm.
weed's illegal. I think saying no in that case is justified because the state is actually
Oh,
enacting
I
violence, an
completely agree with you.
unjust violence against that individual. Um,
Completely agree with
so
you.
I think that like lying to protect this individual from the violence of the state, I think is justified in that case.
But that is also a
But
different
that's like an
thing.
extreme example.
Yes.
That's an extreme
And also
example.
again, like in the example that I talked about, it wasn't my radio job, but I've had jobs in which I've had to keep certain things to myself and keep certain things straight. And that is a very stressful situation, but I would not compare that to whether or not you're going to turn somebody in for an unjust law. you know?
Yeah. Well, and also
I think
sometimes, God,
no, go ahead.
sometimes the answer, the honest answer is I don't want to tell you, and that's perfectly fine too.
Well,
To
yeah,
many any query almost.
that's the thing. If you're not allowed to not say like your opinion, then there's still a problem. You need to be able to abstain from a conversation if you want. I don't think that I don't think that forcing people to say the whole truth every single second of the day is necessarily the remedy for what we're talking about either.
Right. Well, you shouldn't lie to people, and you shouldn't deliberately mislead them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for your own gain, like in a selfish situation as opposed to like resisting an unjust law or protecting somebody. Like there's harm that can be done purely out of your own greed. And I generally don't talk about like greed or anything like. I know that a lot of people think that a communist is like the greedy capitalist. I don't actually care about greed at all, but I do think that they're in a more like individualized, like interpersonal situation. Thinking about greed and those types of things are actually valid thing. Like, are you exerting a negative motive on someone else? Like, telling the truth could actually be doing that too. Like, it's really, if we're talking about individual and interpersonal interactions, there are some times where telling the truth is a hurtful thing to do, and you don't do that. But like again, that's not the same thing as just endlessly having to keep a bunch of lies straight. That's maybe not saying something that doesn't need to be said.
Yeah, anyway, the lie thing, that was the whole honesty thing, that was a whole sidebar. I actually had this whole other thing I wanted to bring up instead, but that's one change I've undergone. But the other one is, and I'm still trying to figure out how I want to navigate this, but I don't have strong opinions on like 99% of things because I don't know enough about 99% of
No,
things.
well, see,
You cut out. I can't hear you.
flagrant. The podcast flagrant. Can you hear me now? Are we
Uh,
good?
I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
hear you
yeah.
now. Yeah, go ahead and restart. Sorry, I
Okay,
couldn't hear anything you said except for flagrants. That's all I heard.
okay. Are you familiar with the podcast Flagrant?
I am not.
Well, it's a podcast hosted by comedian Andrew Schultz. It's not always a good podcast. I'm not bringing it up because I think that it's great or anything. But he made a decent point on it recently, and the only reason I even know about it because I saw a smaller clip of it. But he was talking about how, in order to be like a decent person and have friends, and interact with society in a normal capacity or productive capacity, even you can't know everything about everything. Like, it would take all of your time. You would never not be researching something. It's not possible. Like, it's physically, there's not enough time in a single person's life to understand everything. And that means you probably shouldn't have an opinion on everything because you don't understand everything.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. Like, I do have, but I also, you can't live in a world where you can't have so I used to think like, well, I just won't have, I'll just be neutral on everything that I don't know about. But then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, shit,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm a voting citizen, and in a in a
Right.
democratic society, it's important that we make decisions. We can't be paralyzed with indecision constantly. You have to have a balance. Um, but I think you shouldn't be married to your beliefs. I think that like I have like, if you ask me on guns, I'm like, yeah, I'm like probably like generally more pro gun, I guess. But like I'm
Mm-hmm.
not married to like that belief necessarily.
Right.
Um anyway, I think it's important to address this in chat. I don't know this person necessarily. Okama Man in the chat says, to tell the truth, it is hard to forgive. I know you've changed your ideas, but it's hard to forgive being called all these names. But hey, time heals all wounds. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know Okama Man off the top of my head. I will say, if I've ever insulted you, I apologize, and I don't intend to randomly insult you again. If there is something specific between us, you're welcome to approach me in some way.
Well, you have people
Um,
blocked on Twitter, by the way, because like
yeah,
the
and
the block bot,
if you are
the
blocked, find some person to say something to. Like,
or join my Discord because Peter's in there, and so am I.
yeah, I'm in Tachyon's Discord. If you need to be able to contact me, and
Linked in the description.
have you blocked on Twitter, it's not because I remember who you are. For one, like, I don't. I had block lists on my thing, and I don't know who is blocked and who isn't. So, um, what was the last point you made? Because it was
It
something.
was about strong opinions, or well, we have to have some opinion in a democratic society
Right.
because it's important that citizens be engaged, and because you can't be an expert on everything, you have to make decisions to some extent about policies, even if you aren't an expert on that area.
I mean, it's different when you're engaging in, like, let's say a voting situation where, also, uh, just in our little hypothetical, let's say your vote actually matters. Um,
I think your vote does matter. I think people should vote. I think people should do more than vote too, if
well,
they have strong views.
that's not really what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is, it's important to at least when you have a bunch of multiple choices, at least trying to make the right decisions. Like, to me, if I say yes or no and yes or no has an effect, like, I should be able to abstain, but it's probably good for me to at least try to understand the situation to the best of my ability in terms of the best of what fits into my life. Um, I think that there's a threshold for being comfortable with actually, like, saying, I know enough about this to make a decision. I don't know enough about this to make a decision. Um, in terms of, like, having strong opinions or not being married to your position. I think that I try to live basically on inductive reasoning rather than deductive reasoning. Does that make sense? Or do I like
Please
does
explain
it
that really quick.
So inductive reasoning is when, instead of stating a conclusion and then working towards it by gathering evidence or what have you, you gather the evidence and come up with the conclusion based on the evidence. Deductive reasoning is where you state a conclusion and then attempt to prove it. And both of them have their uses, but I try generally to attempt to live inductive reasoning. I don't try to state a conclusion and work towards it, but rather I try to know as much as I can and then develop conclusions from that.
Well, let me ask then, Peter, because obviously you're talking to the GamerGate book guy. Well, I shouldn't. I'm not the GamerGate book guy. There's also James Desborough. He wrote a book as well. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
poo-poo his effort. I think it's. I haven't read it yet. I actually had a copy. It was in my car, and I guess I had the window down at one point, and water damaged the copy, and so I've not. I had to throw it out. Very sad. I've not got a new copy yet. This has been
Mm.
several years. But I like James as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm sure he probably did a great job. Um, so I'm also working on a second GamerGate book. Anyway, fuck. One thing about telling the truth a lot is you have to caveat everything. Um,
True.
oh, also one thing that's changed too is I take into account, and maybe I've always been like, I don't know, but I one thing that's true too is maybe you've noticed this, Peter. This is way the fuck off topic, but I think it's important that you take into account like the interests of a huge number of people, especially who are
Uh-huh.
relevant to the story at least, right? And so like I've
Sure.
tried to do this as a journalist, insofar as I am one. Journalism is an action that people perform, I think. So, but like
Yeah.
when I covered the
There are a
saltier
lot of
thing,
people that consider me a journalist. I don't put forward that I'm a journalist, and I have people call me a journalist all the time.
so I so did you see my video on the saltier than crate controversy?
I did not see it, but
Basically, so
I'm,
the you know the Andrew doll, he was a GamerGate guy. He's a YouTuber.
I want to say yeah.
Okay, you might have seen his stuff, but like, anyway, he got banned on Reddit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Huge fucking story. You could watch my 36-minute video or whatever it is on it. Anyway,
I will watch it. Yeah.
if you like, what would you think? He got banned because of basically this online community. Not even like not the community itself, but members of the community. Um, Basically wanted to fuck with him and mass reported him, and they even admit to this. Now, what would
Ooh.
you think? Me, I interviewed the Andrew Doll. I know him. I wouldn't say we're like friends because I'm like pretty professional online. Um,
Right.
but like I like the guy. He's a cool guy, I guess. Um,
Sure. Friendly.
yeah,
Is that
friendly,
it?
friendly. So,
Okay.
how do you think I would handle the situation? How would I investigate and report on this story?
Well, are we talking about like how would be best to,
Or
or how?
how do you think that? How do you think that Tachyon blew the guy who was a part of GamerGate? How do you think the
Right.
guy and who knows Andrew Dahl and has like a generally positive impression of him? Like, how do you think that I would cover the story if that's all the information you had about me?
I would think that you'd cover him vaguely positively, but I think that if I know you well enough at this point, I'm not saying like I know you very well or anything, but I would guess that you would also disclose that relationship, and therefore it would make a lot more sense. You know what I mean? I feel like it's not a situation where I'd immediately make a judgment, based on what I know of you now, as now that we've interacted quite a bit, I don't know. It's tough. If I were to just go based off of
Pro Gamergate, relatively friendly with the person, has interviewed them for their ongoing project, and like has connections with other communities that this group doesn't like. Those four things.
and this guy is pro Gamergate or pro
Yeah,
or
he is slash was Pro Gamergate. Yeah.
well, you would guess that it would be a fair interview.
No. Me
I,
covering him getting banned by this community or by these individuals, I should say.
I'm having trouble with this question, I think.
Just watch the video at some point. Anyway,
Okay,
basically,
I will watch the video.
I somehow I managed to make the video in such a way that like even though I clearly condemned the actions, well, I don't give my opinion until the end. Um, but
Right, right.
I just lay out the facts. But I like I'm like getting requests for comments from like all the players involved, and like
Okay,
they're actually talking with me. I'm sure they strongly suspect I'm gonna fuck them over because like that's
right.
how a lot of people operate. But even the people who I think did bad stuff, they're even like, "Wow, you actually covered that pretty fairly."
Good. I mean, that's good to hear. Like, that's how that should work.
Yeah.
That's what, as we said, what journalism is.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not, everybody who is put under the category of journalism is doing journalism, I get put in the category of doing journalism based on, I think, my books. I don't know. I don't consider my books journalism. I consider them research projects, certainly. And I do think that they're extensive, and I think that they're very well sourced, and I think I do a lot of work on them, but I don't know. I do have people put like every time I go on the radio, they typically say stuff. They say like, "This is journalist Peter Coffin," and I don't know whether that's because they don't have something to call me or not. But yeah, I do think that maybe the label is sometimes a little overused. But what to me it sounds like you're doing is journalism in that case.
Well, speaking of including a diverse array of perspectives, Okama man did do a follow up. He says, "No worries, man. Like I said, it's not good to hold on to negative thoughts for too long. Ha ha ha. My comment was more of a comment on the reception and the people who can't forgive."
Okay, sure. I to me, I don't hold on to resentments, or I try not to hold on to resentments. Anyways, I'm sure that there are some that I hold on to, but I don't generally. I don't. I'm not really aware of them at the moment. I've done a lot of. I've done inventory on those, and I've tried to resolve it. Um, except for obviously where it would not be possible or it would bother somebody or whatever. Um, I personally, I agree with that quite a bit. I don't think that it's good to hold on to the resentment. I think that it burns you up inside and it sucks. As such, like I said, I don't really hold on to any resentments from Gamergate. I can remember things that I certainly didn't enjoy, but like I don't hold on to resentments from the anti-Gamergate or the Gamergate. I do think that like both are worth criticism, and I think that the actual purpose of Gamergate, the actual like grievances that a lot of people, when people said there's it's about ethics in journalism, I think that most people who are saying that really meant it at this point. I don't know that that's what it ultimately ended up about, but I think that that's what people wanted it to be about. You know,